And Hester is going to run it out past the 40 into Giants territory. He is going to go all the way. Touchdown, Chicago.
Trying to find somebody open and throws an interception. And it's Charles Woodson's 55th of his career.
Dives for the touchdown, San Francisco.
I want to play desperately, and I'm going to try to drive everyone nuts till they give me a shot.
Favre threw an almost impossible 336 career interceptions.
See that?
Yeah. We have here the Brett Favre interceptions calendar.
It's the lovable kicking bear doll. And guess what? It comes with its own goalpost. Isn't that neat?
Double doink.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, and this is a special edition of Cut the Cheese, Poke the Bear, Roast the Niner. We're in free agency heading into season 2025. And gentlemen, bombshell free agency. We've got Gold Rush here today. We've got Lord Uther. I'm UrzaMaster. We've got so much to talk about. I don't want to cut into anybody's time, but I'm going to give a recap of some highlights of the teams that we three do not represent, starting off in alphabetical order with the Arizona Cardinals. The retained players, nothing to write home about, but they did sign Jacoby Brissett for 2 years at $12.5 million. Atlanta retained a lot of their players. They also brought in Leonard Floyd for 1 year at $10 million, kind of a big signing there. Baltimore, not a lot of moves, but they did sign DeAndre Hopkins. They've been talking about this one for many years, especially DeAndre himself. Buffalo, look, they're going to keep Josh Allen. I think we all know their retentions were coming. The big one there, Joey Bosa coming to Buffalo. Big one. Carolina, a lot of retention there. The big signings aren't all that big, but kind of the one that surprises me on the list here is Rico Dowdle, signing for 1 year at $6.5 million. Not actually familiar with that guy, but big money there. Cincinnati, a lot of retention, not a lot of signings, but Samaje Perine on for 2 years, and Taddarrell Slayton, defensive tackle, 2 years, $15.1 million. It's a lot for a tackle I've never heard of. Cleveland traded for Kenny Pickett and brought in Cornelius Lucas, 2 years, $10 million at offensive tackle. So beefing up that O-line, which they desperately need. Dallas, couple of trades, nothing huge. They signed a lot of free agents. If you want to know more about Dallas, you can dive into it. Nothing I see.
They signed Daniel Jones, didn't they? I think they did. Are they going to?
No.
What? Sure.
No, they did not sign Daniel Jones. It's not on their list.
I think that. All right.
They signed Rob Jones, an offensive lineman, but I don't see Daniel Jones on their list. Denver, not a whole lot going on there. A lot of retentions, but they signed safety Tanaloa Hufanga, 3 years, $45 million, and Dre Greenlaw, 3 years, $35 million. So big spenders on the defense there. Detroit, a lot of re-signed folks. Cornerback, DJ Reed, 3 years, $48 million. That seems like a lot for DJ Reed, in my opinion. We'll skip over my Packers for now. Houston, I don't know if you fellas heard about this, but they traded for Christian Kirk from the Jaguars. CJ Gardner-Johnson traded for from the Eagles. They retained a few players. Their signings, though, a lot of money. I wouldn't say it's a ton of talent, but they did get Tremon Smith at kick returner and cornerback, 2 years, $7 million. Indies coming in hot with a lot of signings, not very many retentions.
There's the Daniel Jones signing.
Braden Smith.
Was
Daniel
Indy.
Jones, there you go. 1 year, $14 million for Indy. We'll talk more about Indy in a moment here. Jaguars, they signed a bunch of players. They did not actually retain anyone, it looks like. Big one for the Jags. I'm looking at Jordan Lewis, 3 years, $30 million, and Patrick McCarry, 3 years, $37.5 million on the offensive line. Kansas City retained a good amount of players. Retaining Juju, I think I might have let him go, but they retained him for 1 year. They also signed Gardner Minshew for a year, Jalen Moore, 2 years, $30 million, and cornerback Christian Fulton, 2 years, $15 million. Pretty interesting. LV Raiders, I'll never get over that. They'll always be Oakland to me. They did retain Max Crosby. They also traded with the Seahawks Geno Smith, which was a big surprise. They signed ye old Eric Stokes. Packer fans remember him. 1 year, $4 million, and Raheem Mostert, veteran around the league here, $2.1 million for a year. LA Chargers out in Gold Rush's neck of the woods here. My good friend, punter J.K. Scott, got signed 2 years, $6 million. That was a retention signing. They did keep Khalil Mack 1 more year, $18 million. I don't know about y'all. I played for the Chargers for a year for $18 million. I don't care if I get injured. They signed, this was a big one, Najee Harris, 1 year, $5.25 million. That was a bit of a surprise to me, coming out of Pittsburgh. LA Rams, Gold Rush, I think you might be interested to find out that they signed your boy Jimmy G. 1 year, $4.505 million. They also restructured Matt Stafford's contract, signed Devontae Adams, 2 years, $46 million. DT Poona Ford, 3 years, $29.6 million. That's a lot of cash on 2 players there. Miami, a lot of retentions. Signings, not a lot of splashes here. They did pick up Zach Wilson for a year at $6 million. And Alexander Madison, former Vikings player there. Speaking of, the Vikings traded for a pretty big blockbuster pickup. I'll let Gold Rush get into that in a moment. They did retain Aaron Jones, restructured him 2 years, $20 million. And they signed over quite a few players, but defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, 3 years, $60 million, and Javon Hargrave, 2 years, $30 million. So beefing up their defense, they also picked up some offensive linemen. Will Fries, 5 years, $88 million at guard. I'm not sure what Minnesota's doing there. We'll see there. New England only retained Austin Hooper, $5 million for 1 year. They signed like half the league. They got Josh Dobbs. They got K'Lavon Chaisson. They've got Kiris Tonga. They've got Robert Spillane at linebacker. Carlton Davis, 3 years, $60 million. But the big one is defensive tackle Milton Williams, 4 years, $104 million. Unreal. New Orleans Saints traded for Devon Godchaux from the Patriots. They retained several of their players. The big one, Chase Young, 3 years, $51 million. The signings, nothing to write home about except for safety Justin Reed, 3 years, $37.5 million. New York Football Giants. They somehow managed to keep Darius Slayton, 3 years, $36 million. They re-signed Tommy DeVito, everybody's favorite at quarterback, for $1 million just over for 1 year. They signed a bunch of guards, linemen, and a cornerback, Paulson Adebo, 3 years, $54 million. Interesting to see what they've done out there. And, of course, the Jets, Jets. We've got Jamie Sherwood retained $45 million over the next 3 years. Justin Fields brought on 2 years, $40 million at quarterback. Good luck, Jets. They also picked up center Josh Myers from the Packers, signed him. Philly picked up a QB from the Browns, guard from the Texans. Saquon Barkley retained him, $41.2 million. Zach Baun, 3 years, $51 million. They also signed my boy A.J. Dillon. Sad to see him go, but good fit for him. Pittsburgh. Got some big signings here, fellas. DK Metcalf signed from the Seahawks, or rather traded, 5-year, $150 million contract for DK Metcalf. Mason Rudolph, 2 years, $8 million. Let's see, who else is big on here? Darius Slay, a year, $10 million. It's impressive to see him still playing, to be honest. 49ers, I'm sure Gold Rush will get into here in a moment. We'll start with him. Linebacker Ernest Jones IV, retained by the Seahawks, $33 million over 3 years. Jerron Reed, 3 years, $25 million. And they signed Sam Darnold, 3 years, $100.5 million. Good for that kid. Good for that kid. MVS, former Packer, $5.5 million to the Seahawks. Tampa Bay retains most of their roster here. Chris Godwin, 3 years, $66 million is the big one. Signed onto their staff QB Kyle Trask, 1 year, $2.7 million. Tennessee Titans, good retentions there. Nothing crazy in terms of spending other than their signing of Dan Moore Jr., 4 years, $82 million at offensive tackle. Some of these numbers just seem like they're made up. The Commanders traded for a big-time wide receiver that I'll let Gold Rush get into. And they also got Laramie Tunsil at tackle from the Texans. Retentions all look about as what you would figure, although Marcus Mariota they retained. I don't know, a year, $8 million, why not? They also signed to their roster Javon Kinlaw, 3 years, $45 million at defensive tackle. And that sums up the rest of the league. Gold Rush, I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us about your Niners. What do they got going in this free agency?
This list, which if it were in any way legible, you would be able to see, is an extensive who's coming and, more importantly, who's leaving. When you play a schedule and you're 6-11, you give the front office the excuse to make a few changes. Obviously, 6-11 doesn't support the fan base, doesn't support the players in the building, management, the league, et cetera, et cetera. So what are the Niners doing? Well, they're taking a good hard look at their cap, and they decided that this was the time to part with several higher priced players or players due for exorbitant raises. Brock Purdy's inevitable re-signing seems to be the number one budgetary issue on the table. I've heard $40 million a season. Don't know exactly. Does that mean it's going to be only a 3-year? Are they going to structure it like they did Jimmy G, where on paper it looks like a lot, but in reality there's a lot of exit ramps for both player and team? So still some questions there. Who did they add? Well, they got a tight end from the Jaguars, Luke Farrell. He's on a 3-year deal. They picked up DeMarcus Robinson from the Los Angeles Rams on a 1-year deal at wide receiver. He's a Brandon Ayuk insurance in case Ayuk has any setbacks recovering from his surgery last year. Cornerback from Seattle, Trey Brown. To back up Brock Purdy, they went out and got Mac Jones. You might remember him as the New England Patriots future star that then fell from the stars and ended up on Jacksonville last season, where he started 7 games and was pretty consistent. He threw 8 touchdowns and he threw 8 interceptions. So basically, coin toss, it's Mac Jones, Brock Purdy be in good health, and so forth. So let's not forget Sam Darnold leveraged a backup Niners slot 2 years ago into where he is now currently, first with the Vikings and then with now Seattle. And then we got rid of a player on Tuesday and then re-signed him by early Saturday. Kyle Juszczyk, an 8-year fullback, beloved by fan base and everyone in the building alike. His wife is an aspiring fashion designer who makes some pretty cool jackets for players and celebrities. She'll be sewing away still in the Bay Area as Kyle Juszczyk was released and then re-signed a 2-year deal worth $8 million. There was a little bit of acrimony that had to be ironed out. Last year, they approached him with a pay cut, and he reluctantly accepted. This year, he was not interested in a pay cut, which has led to his release. But then somebody had a change of heart during the week and said, you know what? You're coming back, Juice. And so he did. But there are several players who are not coming back. As I said, John Lynch is not calling it a rebuild. It's hard to come up with an adjective that would accurately describe it. It's a retooling for sure. And players who were part of this drive for the championship core are no longer going to be wearing red and gold on the sidelines in 2025. Let's start with Deebo Samuel. He was traded, requested a trade, received his trade. He'll be lighting it up for the Washington Commanders. Come on, a hot, young NFC team got to the championship game last season. I mean, on paper, it looks like a solid addition to somebody who wants to, be a consistent player in the NFC East. Now, Washington's going to have the burden of expectations this season. They no longer can sneak up on anybody with a less competitive scheduling and so forth. All those division games, even against teams like the New York Football Giants, they're going to be slugfests. No one is sleeping on the Commanders this year, so it's up to them to prove that they have turned around years, decades of bad habits and lazy free agency signings and the like. But Deebo Samuel, a very nice addition. As mentioned, Javon Hargrave, he ended up in Minnesota. Chivarius Ward, solid corner who experienced some family tragedy, losing his daughter last year during the season. He wanted to turn the page, so he ended up in Indianapolis. Leonard Floyd, another high-profile free agent, was released, ended up in the ATL. Dre Greenlaw, Kurt Warner's soulmate on that defensive sort of secondary there, the linebacking core, that takes a hit. Kurt Warner will now have to patrol without Dre Greenlaw at his side. Joshua Dobbs, replaced by Mac Jones. Joshua Dobbs makes his way to the Patriots. Aaron Banks, I think he's an offensive tackle, over to Green Bay, which Ursa, I'm probably sure, will mention. Hufanga ends up as a Bronco. Elijah Mitchell, backup running back, ends up as a Chief. And yes, just within the last 24 hours, Jordan Mason, who was filling in nicely for Christian McCaffrey, who spent most of last season on the sidelines injured. Jordan Mason goes to the Vikings, traded for a 6th-round pick. And I believe the Vikings and the Niners in this year's draft end up swapping in some round. The Niners now draft 118 and the Vikings draft like 133 or something. It's there. So some depth at running back has been shed. Still have Isaac Guerendo, who came on pretty well late last season, but also hit the injury bug. And obviously Christian McCaffrey is your all-pro running back. Can he rediscover the form from 2 seasons ago when he was basically one of the best all-around players in the league? Or will he continue to contend as he has through his career with nagging injuries, bumps, bruises, or otherwise? This is something that bears watching, but we don't have the luxury anymore of having a 3-4-headed monster to be able to execute Kyle Shanahan's offense. So as a fan, as a 49ers fan, you see these big names and, ending up on other teams, and it makes you nervous. It makes you wonder, is that going to affect chemistry? Is it going to affect depth? All of that. But then you look at who's staying, as of now, McCaffrey, Brock Purdy when he gets re-signed, Brandon Ayuk coming off the injury, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa. So am I here to say that, man, this team is loaded for the Super Bowl? Not yet. They underachieved in 2024, and this is what happens when you underachieve: is that you make some tough decisions. It is a business. Do they have enough talent to compete in the NFC? Probably. I say it's a conditional probably right now. They can't really do much worse than they did last season at 6-11. But they're going to have some bounces go their way. If I was in the NFC and handicapping right now, I like, again, the young, enthusiastic Commanders. I like the Green Bay Packers, obviously, another team on the up. I mean, the Chicago Bears. Lord Uther will talk about in a few minutes about what he's thinking. There are other teams right now on paper that look like they could make Detroit Lions, that look like they could make deep runs in December and January. But we embrace change. We wrap our arms around it. And the Niners are going to look a little different. Robert Saleh will be back to call the defense. Kyle Shanahan has named an offensive coordinator. He's still going to be calling the plays, but we actually have a credited offensive coordinator, so there'll be, and we've got a new special teams coach, and special teams wasn't a big bugaboo for the Niners last season. So he comes over from the Jets, who had, if nothing else, pretty decent kick coverage and punt coverage and the ability to get advantages on that side of the ledger. So we'll see. Like always, I will remain cautiously optimistic. But yeah, of all the teams in the league, you can look up and down. The big names took paychecks elsewhere and started fresh starts around the league. So yeah, it does hurt a little.
And speaking about getting the runs, Lord Uther, how's your Chicago Bears doing?
That was very good. Excuse me. Well, obviously, new coach, new coaches, allegedly a new attitude, going after linemen, getting rid of Keenan Allen. It looks like he's not coming back. So can I go into the depth of a gold rush? I cannot, because us Bears fans are a lot of emotion and not a whole heck of a lot of thought process. I hope I get lit up for that one. Maybe I'm trolling myself. Anyway, so I like what they've done. We talk about this a lot, right? It's like it's the aura or the feelings that you have of what an organization is doing, and it's when Ben Johnson came in on his first day and gave this little speech to the entire Bears organization, or at least the Bears staff at Hallis Hall, and you could almost feel the change in the air. I think the big question is it going to be insta success? I was looking at the roster just real quick. It seems like it seemed like we're a little younger, except a couple of the guys that we recently signed might have a few more years behind it. But our oldest player is Mercedes Lewis. He has 19 years of experience. So, if you were to remove him, and if you were to remove Cairo Santos with 11 years of experience, and then Jake McQuaid, who's the long snapper with 14, which those long snappers seem to just play forever, the roster is kind of young, and I really think they're obviously they're shaping it all around Caleb Williams, right? And is that I think that tells you something. I almost feel like the Lions are a little jealous of what's going on here. I've heard some Lions players talking about Ben Johnson leaving and how that's going to they've alluded to how that's going to affect the organization. St. Brown on his podcast was talking about how much of a loss it is for Ben Johnson to be gone. So I think it's an interesting dynamic. Could you see this flip where the Bears somehow move to the top of this division? Obviously, the competition is going to be the Packers there. I'm really wondering how the Lions are going to react to last year and what they went through and losing what appears to be two important coaches. that mean a lot to that organization. And again, what are they going to do with that too? So I do like the Bears trying to get that offensive line going in the right direction, even their defensive line too, knowing that's where they're lacking. I think DeAndre Swift is the biggest question mark out of everything. I don't know if you have a real power runner in a sense, like I think the Bears like to have to kind of set up the pass, which is something that's always kind of happened in Chicago, because we know that Swift would rather just catch the ball and run with it, I think, versus just having some of those straight up running plays for him where he's not, it's not his bread and butter, right? He's more that third down, get the ball to him in the flat kind of back and let him run with it off of a pass. So I think that might be the one piece on offense where they got to get that figured out. But, versus last season, I shouldn't say that because last season I thought they had a chance to win a division. But I feel hopeful again, is what I'm getting at. I think a lot of Bears fans are feeling that way. I will say that, and I think it's saving the McCaskies that they're doing this, because the hate for the McCaskies down here seems to have backed off a little bit. The demands or the thoughts or the discussions of sell the team have suddenly gone quiet. Not silent, but it's quieter. And that's because they're spending money, which is just something they don't seem to typically do. The feelings down here, though, is that if this doesn't work in the next couple of years, will the McCaskies ever make a move like this again? Or would they possibly just sell and let someone else move on with the franchise? I do think it's make or break for the McCaskey family right now. This is either, we're going to make a run in the playoffs, we're going to try and get to Super Bowl and have a legit chance, or in a couple of years they're just going to burn it down. And I think something else too is there's just not a lot of patience. I think that's in a lot of sports. You've got to give a team a time to grow. Is 2 years enough? Is 3 years enough? I mean, what is the true amount of time, excuse me, that you really give someone to try to turn their team or an organization around? I will say this. I do think in the NFL, you can make the quickest turnarounds. I think basketball is a little bit tougher. I think baseball, it's extremely tough to completely flip your team around. I think that takes more time. But I think the NFL, you're in that position where just a couple of signings, maybe a couple of good draft picks, because I also think the NFL is also a place where you can get really good players deeper in the draft. You really don't get that in the NBA. Your second-round picks in the NBA, I mean, that's why they did around. NBA used to go like 5 or 6 rounds or something crazy like that. And they realized that those players never make it, so they just slashed it back to 2 rounds. And even most of your second-rounders don't make an impact, right? So you're saying there's a chance. And that's all I'm saying.
That sounds like a true Bears fan right there. I'm hopeful. It's almost April, and in September we're like, darn it.
I really do think it's going to be different, right? I feel like they've finally gone after a legitimate coach and a guy who knows what he's doing. Could you have made the argument for, Matt Nagy, I think, might have been the next closest thing in terms of believing that he could make something happen. But I think the guy was always just an offensive coordinator. Like, he didn't have the wherewithal, or I don't know if you want to call it the strength. There's a couple words I want to use that I can't really use right now. I think he can be the fun guy and the disciplinarian at the very same time. That's a tough line to walk, man. It's a very tough line, I think, to walk with players. That's legit. You can have their back, and you got to be able to call them out. And I also think it's tough because when you get to the NFL, and maybe actually college now, those players are making more than you are as the coach? And do they feel like, will they be coachable? Right? Because when they start making money, they think they're better than you, and then they're not coachable, and that causes issues. So is Ben Johnson the guy that's going to tell someone what to do? Because they were talking about the OC that they let go, and I'm drawing a blank for some reason. Who is the OC we let go at the beginning of the season? Why am I drawing a blank on that?
I don't know why I want to say Mark Trespin, but
because that's the easy answer. Anyway, I'm drawing a blank right now. Sorry, Bears fans. But he supposedly, when the wide receivers were running their routes in practice and stuff, they weren't going hard. He wasn't saying anything. Like, he wasn't telling them to do more, to be better. And when the players aren't listening to you and they're not coachable, you're going to have problems. And I think Ben Johnson brings that. I'm going to look up the OC because people are going to rip me on TikTok.
oh boy,
Some Bears fan you are. Why don't you go play Madden and learn everybody?
No, I hear you. Drop that in the comments, by the way. Blow up Lord Uther, Bears fans, and watch me blow up Bears fans right now. I like the Ben Johnson pickup for the Bears. I do, in terms of coaching. I don't think he's the answer. I don't think any of the players they got are the answer. I think they are still rebuilding. I really, truly think they're trying to find an identity. And I don't know why they ever got away from monster defense. That, I think, was always the scary backbone of the Bears. That once you got the defense dialed in, with Brian Urlacher back there, they were always tough. Even with Gross Rexman, they were tough. So I don't know. If I'm a Bears fan, I'm personally looking for that more than I am on offense. I think the offense is frankly serviceable. It's really the defense that, in my opinion, has not been. It's been good, and at times it's been really good, but it's never been that level of like teams are scared to throw across your middle or into your secondary or scared to throw in the flat against you. And that counts for something in this league, because there's a lot of teams, especially in the NFC North, that deep ball or very short behind the line type plays are their bread and butter. And I'm looking at my Green Bay Packers, frustratedly so. And that's where I'll pick it up. Is we had two good retentions. Kicker Brandon McManus is back for 3 years, $15.3 million. I'm really happy about that signing. One, because I think McManus is a good player that deserves a nice place to play. And I think he's a good cultural fit in Green Bay. Linebacker Isaiah McDuffie, I think he was underrated. 2 years at $8 million. I would have tried to sign him for a couple more years, maybe 4 at 20. That's just me. Picking up Aaron Banks, I think, was huge. We needed the help on the offensive line. 4 years at $77 million seems like a lot, though. But they were able to get Nate Hobbs out at corner at $448. 4 years, $48 million. That's a decent pickup. I'm okay with that. My worry is, are they going to part ways with Jair Alexander? Because as much as I bitch about Jair Alexander, I feel like that could be a really nice secondary combination back there. Jair, to his credit, is a shutdown corner still. Does he occasionally give up a big play? Yeah, more than he ever did. But if I'm the Packers, I'm looking to keep him. I'm looking to re-sign him. I know 6 months ago I would have totally disagreed with myself, but in light of all of the movement in the league so far in free agency and what's coming up in the draft, I would feel a lot better about having Jair Alexander in my secondary going into the season. That's it. That's all 4 of the Packers' major moves. Right now, I think everybody's just kind of waiting on bated breath to see, what is Aaron Rodgers going to do? He wants to play. Sources say he wants to play for the Vikings, and then Adam Schefter says, no, he doesn't want to play for the Vikings. There's still teams out there that could sign him. New York Football Giants, maybe some dark horse candidate out there that You know, there was some talk about Pittsburgh for a while. That's still on the table, even though they picked up another quarterback. I really think it's possible Rodgers could play in New York. I think it's possible he could play in Pittsburgh. I still think there might be another team out there that wants to pick up a veteran quarterback, maybe to sit their current starter and have him learn from one of the best. Or just have him be in the locker room. Even if you signed him and somehow talked him into being a backup, you're going to pay way too much money for him. And I think, honestly, that's why we haven't seen this monstrous signing from the Vikings, is they don't want to pay Aaron Rodgers. They didn't want to pay a tested and proven quarterback, any of them that were on their roster. They had like 8 at the end of the season. They didn't want to pay any of them. They got their JJ, and they're like, all right, we're going to develop this guy. We're going to try and steal a move out of the Packers playbook and draft and develop here. Are they going to start him, or are they going to try and get Rodgers and start Rodgers to hopefully mentor JJ McCarthy? And do you want Aaron Rodgers telling your very impressionable new quarterback what to do? Because I don't know that I do. All honesty. And I will leave all of Aaron Rodgers' personal beliefs and personal life out of the mix. As a football player, strictly speaking, I don't feel he has the right ideology to be a leader. And I think that's what the Vikings desperately needed at quarterback. And I think they had their guy and let him go. And that's where and the Vikings made some good moves, and they were a great team last year. They could be another great team this year. But if you sign Aaron Rodgers, I think you're signing a major liability at quarterback. Not because of all the outside of the football stuff, but I honestly think he's past his effectiveness. Now, if he comes in as a backup, if you can somehow get him to be a sideline mentor, like some guys have done. I'm looking at the Detmer brothers. I'm looking at, some of the other big name quarterbacks that were just like, cool, my time's over. I'm going to sit on the bench and step in like Charlie Whitehurst. Great. I'm cool with that. But even in that capacity, I don't want that drama poisoning my locker room. The Vikings are very easily divided, as we've seen in the past. They've had it with coaches. They've had it with the Love Boat. It still happens. This is a Minnesota thing. And I'm not going to hold my breath.
So the Vikings here, so who do they go after? Russell Wilson? Because he's a free, I'm just looking at available free agents. Carson Wentz, Jameis Winston, Flacco. Then there's Rodgers, Teddy Bridgewater Returns to Minnesota.
Love Teddy. They love Teddy.
Yeah, could do that. I mean, or just go with Brett Ripon. I mean, the son of Mark. Why would you not? Come on. That's the name. By the way, Shane Waldron was the OC. That was my fault. Bears fans. Just to go back to your idea of some of the Bears signings, they are older guys. Well, one of them's an older guy, right? So and their line, it's on the line. It's the defensive tackle. Grady Jarrett here. He's going to be 34 by the time his contract's out. He's 32 right now. That how does that look and feel in a sense, especially when you're a lineman and you're getting pummeled all the time and thrown around? That really can't help. And then they signed a defensive end who, he's 26, but I believe that he's been injured in the past. Deo, I can't even say the last name. Odedingbo is the last name.
Odedingbo.
Yeah, I can't say it. I mean, it's
a wild situation.
We've turned into Cubs fans just saying this season.
This season, that season. But hey, didn't they win a World Series not that long ago?
It was actually a long time ago. Well, I mean, define long time ago, because a Super Bowl for the Bears, it was what are we
85.
going on now? 40 years.
40 years this year.
That's a long time. Yeah, it's a long time.
Didn't the Cubs win in like 2014?
I
like
think
that?
it might have.
It was less than 15 years ago, I think.
Yeah. Let's see. Cubs World Series. I think Rodgers. I don't think he can go to Pittsburgh. Don't you think he's going to butt heads with Tomlin?
He's going to butt heads with anybody. And that's the problem with Rodgers, is he is going to assert himself. He might not do it at first. He might play ball up until preseason, but the second you tell him something he doesn't want to hear, it's game over. If I'm the Vikings, and I'm being totally straight with you guys, if I'm the Vikings, I think the best option out there to pick up a vet at quarterback is Trey Lance. I think you can get him on the cheap. He has a lot of good experience, and he's really not bad. He's been on a couple of bad teams or in bad situations, but he's a decent quarterback, and he's young.
Do you think Daniel Jones, why did he walk away from the Vikings? I mean, was it
he got signed?
Did he know something that we don't know?
I don't know that he wanted to be in Minnesota. I mean, he probably wanted the paycheck, and so yeah, I'll sign on to your practice squad for a couple of months, whatever. But I'm looking at the available quarterbacks. Like, unless you wanted to bring back Bridgewater or Keenum, which I don't think they want to do. I mean, what other options do you have? Like, Josh Johnson maybe isn't terrible. Cooper Rush really wouldn't be bad if you want a vet, especially for a backup. If you want to start McCarthy and have a backup veteran, I think Cooper Rush is a solid choice. Again, you got to remember, he played for the Cowboys. He's not really that bad. He was just on a bad team. Same thing with Trey Lance, except he's a lot younger, and I think you could get him for less. And he's not going to start anywhere. So, I mean, he'd be fine with a backup to like share some of that knowledge, West Coast offense, whatever else Dallas does. Minnesota could use that to their advantage in the NFC. I don't know that you quite get that with Cooper Rush, but you have a tried and true quarterback who's won big time games and that if you didn't want to start your new guy and you don't want the drama of Aaron Rodgers, I'd go Cooper Rush, or if you need somebody who might be the guy if J.J. McCarthy doesn't work out, Trey Lance.
All I know is Case Keenum is 37 years old, and he's made $44 million in the league doing a whole lot of nothing. And boy, could I do that too.
Look at Joe Flacco, 40 years old. I mean, they're putting a market value on Flacco right now of just over $3 million. I mean, as a backup, making 3.2 for a year, even 2 years.
He's
$1.5 million a year. Ain't bad.
So real quick question on this front, because I think this is something that's accelerated very quickly, or at least out of control accelerated. The money these quarterbacks are making. I mean, look at what Justin Fields signed for. I mean, what's the average salary for a QB now a year? $30 million? I mean, that's actually seems like it's almost considered cheap in a sense. Why?
I mean, I understand the whole. They got to pay the guys for the injuries and the wear and tear on their body. I think that's a fair assessment. Is that for many years these dudes were severely underpaid given the things that would happen to them when they turned 50 and older, especially CTE. But I will say that there is something to be said about these players who think they're worth way more than they are. Honestly, Rodgers is one of them.
Are you ready for this? In 2025, the average annual salary for a QB is going to be around $53 million. Dak Prescott's making 60. Josh Allen's making 55. Burrow's making 55. Lawrence is making 55. Love is making 55. Tua Tagovailoa is making 53. Goff is 53. Herbert is 52. Jackson 52. Your Super Bowl QB 51 million. I mean, that is what happened. It's absolutely incredible. Think about those numbers.
Tom Brady never made that.
But he does with Fox. No, he makes less at Fox. He makes 30-something.
Makes less at Fox. Tom Brady, I think, if you look up his average, I want to say it's like $14 million over his career was his average annual salary.
That's hey,
that's why he has all those rings. By the way, these quarterbacks, they're overpaid. They're expected to do these amazing things, and some of them get there, but they're not dynasty quarterbacks because they're eating up all the cap space.
Hey, all I can say is Tommy DeVito, the lowest paid QB at $832,000, my friends. And then we have Brock Purdy slightly above that at $934,000. I just say we end there.
With that, cut the cheese, poke the bear, roast the Niner a little bit. Roast that Brock Purdy out there. He deserves more money than that. I'll say that.
He does.
We will catch you all in the next update, probably around the draft, but stay tuned here on Pending Rebrand. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Drop us a comment. We know you think we're all very wrong in everything we say.
And
let us know. We're always up to hear from you. Catch you next time.